What happens when three men corner a woman they believe is defenseless, only to discover she's been trained by the world's most elite military force? This isn't a movie scene or a fantasy tale. This is the real story of Sarah Mitchell, a former Navy SEAL instructor whose split-second decision in a parking lot would shock 301 active SEALs who witnessed what came next. In those crucial moments, everything she had learned about combat, survival, and the warrior mindset would be put to the ultimate test. The attackers thought they had chosen an easy target. They couldn't have been more wrong. What unfolded in the next 30 seconds would become legendary among military circles and prove that when you push someone who has dedicated their life to protecting others, you better be prepared for the consequences. This is her story, raw, unfiltered, and absolutely true. Sarah Mitchell never planned to become one of the most feared combat instructors in the United States Navy. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, she was the daughter of a mechanic and a school teacher, raised with simple values of hard work and standing up for what's right. Her childhood was filled with soccer games, family barbecues, and dreams of becoming a veterinarian. But life has a way of taking unexpected turns, and Sarah's path would lead her far from those quiet Ohio streets. The transformation began during her senior year of high school when a Navy recruiter visited her school. Sarah had always been athletic, captain of both the soccer and track teams, but she had never considered military service. The recruiter spoke about opportunities, education benefits, and the chance to serve something bigger than yourself. Something about those words resonated deep within her, though she couldn't explain why at the time. Her parents were supportive but worried. The idea of their daughter joining the military, especially during a time when conflicts overseas were intensifying, filled them with both pride and fear. Sarah's father, a man of few words but deep wisdom, pulled her aside the night before she left for basic training. He looked her in the eyes and said something she would never forget: "Whatever you do out there, remember who you are and where you come from. And never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." Basic training at Great Lakes Naval Training Center was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The physical demands were intense, but it was the mental challenges that truly tested her. She was one of only 12 women in a company of 80 recruits, and some of her male counterparts made it clear they didn't think she belonged. The drill instructors pushed everyone to their limits, but Sarah noticed they seemed to push her just a little harder, as if testing whether she would break under the pressure. Instead of breaking, Sarah thrived. Every extra push-up, every additional mile run, every harsh word only fueled her determination. She began to understand that this wasn't just about physical strength or following orders. This was about forging something unbreakable inside herself, a core of steel that no one could touch. Her fellow recruits began to notice too. The same men who had initially doubted her capabilities started coming to her for advice, recognizing something special in her approach to the challenges they all faced. After graduating from basic training with honors, Sarah's exceptional performance earned her the opportunity to pursue specialized training. She chose to become a hospital corpsman, drawn by the idea of helping others and the medical training that came with the role. But even as she excelled in her medical studies, learning everything from field surgery to trauma response, her instructors noticed something else about her. She had a natural ability to teach, to break down complex concepts and make them understandable to others. Her first deployment took her to a forward operating base in Afghanistan, where she served as a medic with a Marine infantry unit. The reality of combat hit her like a physical blow during her first firefight. The sound of bullets whistling overhead, the acrid smell of gunpowder, the desperate calls for medical aid, it was chaos unlike anything her training had prepared her for. But, in that chaos, Sarah found her calling. While other medics focused solely on treating wounded soldiers, Sarah began teaching basic medical skills to the Marines in her unit. She showed them how to apply pressure bandages, how to recognize signs of shock, how to keep a wounded comrade alive until professional help arrived. Her impromptu lessons, conducted during brief lulls between patrols, saved lives. More importantly, they gave the Marines confidence in their ability to take care of each other. Word of Sarah's innovative approach reached higher command levels. She wasn't just performing her duties, she was actively improving the capabilities of every unit she worked with. This caught the attention of a Navy SEAL team operating in the same area. They requested her services for a particularly dangerous mission deep in enemy territory, where traditional medical evacuation wouldn't be possible. Working with the SEALs was a revelation for Sarah. These weren't just highly trained soldiers, they were thinking warriors who constantly adapted, learned, and improved. They treated her as an equal from day one, respecting her medical expertise while teaching her advanced combat techniques. During quiet moments between missions, they showed her hand-to-hand combat moves, weapons handling techniques, and tactical thinking that wasn't part of standard Navy training. The SEAL team leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, became something of a mentor to Sarah. He was a 15-year veteran who had seen combat in multiple theaters, and he recognized something special in her combination of medical expertise, teaching ability, and natural warrior instinct. During their third mission together, when their extraction was delayed and they had to fight their way out of an ambush, Sarah proved herself in ways that went far beyond her medical training. Using the combat techniques the SEALs had taught her, combined with her own quick thinking and natural athleticism, she helped eliminate multiple enemy combatants while simultaneously treating wounded team members. Her actions that day earned her a Bronze Star with Valor, but, more importantly, they earned her the respect of some of the most elite warriors in the world. When their deployment ended, Chief Rodriguez made Sarah an offer that would change her life forever. The Navy SEALs were expanding their training programs and needed instructors who could teach both medical skills and combat techniques. They wanted someone who understood the mentality of a warrior while maintaining the healing instincts of a medic. They wanted Sarah. The path to becoming a SEAL instructor wasn't easy, even with Chief Rodriguez's recommendation. Sarah had to complete specialized training programs that pushed her physical and mental capabilities to their absolute limits. She learned advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques from martial arts masters, studied psychology and human behavior, and mastered weapons systems that most Navy personnel never even saw. The psychological training was particularly intense. Sarah learned how to read body language, how to identify threats before they became violent, and how to remain calm under extreme pressure. She studied the mindset of predators, understanding how they selected victims and exploited weaknesses. This knowledge would prove invaluable in ways she couldn't imagine at the time. But, perhaps the most important part of her training was learning to trust her instincts completely. Her instructors taught her that in life or death situations, there's no time for hesitation or second guessing. When your mind and body tell you something is wrong, you act immediately and decisively. This lesson was drilled into her through countless training scenarios, each designed to test her ability to react instantly to threats. After 18 months of intensive training, Sarah officially became a Navy SEAL instructor, one of only 3 women ever to achieve that distinction. Her role was unique. She would teach medical skills to SEAL trainees while also providing advanced combat training to corpsmen and other medical personnel. She was bridging 2 worlds, bringing together the warrior ethos of the SEALs with the life-saving mission of military medicine. Her reputation grew quickly within the special operations community. Sarah had a gift for making complex techniques seem simple, for helping students understand not just what to do but why they were doing it. Her classes weren't just about memorizing procedures, they were about developing the mindset and confidence needed to act decisively when lives hung in the balance. Students came to her from all branches of the military, drawn by her reputation for excellence and her unique approach to training. She demanded perfection from her students because she knew that in combat, anything less could mean death. But she also showed them how to achieve that perfection through understanding, practice, and unwavering self-confidence. What made Sarah truly special as an instructor wasn't just her technical knowledge or combat skills. It was her ability to see potential in every student and push them to achieve more than they thought possible. She had learned from her own journey that the greatest barriers to success weren't physical limitations but mental ones. By helping students overcome their own self-doubt and fear, she was creating warriors who were truly unstoppable. As her reputation grew, Sarah began to understand that her role went far beyond just training individual students. She was helping to shape the future of military medicine and special operations. The techniques she developed and taught would be passed on to countless others, potentially saving thousands of lives in conflicts around the world. But success in the military is often measured by more than just professional achievements. Sarah's personal life had suffered during her rapid rise through the ranks. Relationships were difficult to maintain when your job required absolute dedication and frequent deployments. She had made peace with the sacrifices required by her chosen path, understanding that her mission was bigger than her own personal happiness. Still, there were moments when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. Every student she trained would eventually face real combat situations where their lives would depend on the skills she had taught them. The knowledge that her teaching could mean the difference between a soldier coming home safely or not was both motivating and terrifying. Sarah dealt with this pressure by constantly improving herself. She attended every advanced training course available, studied under martial arts masters in her free time, and maintained physical fitness standards that exceeded even those required for active duty SEALs. She understood that to demand excellence from her students, she had to embody that excellence herself every single day. Her commitment to continuous improvement extended beyond just physical and tactical skills. Sarah studied psychology, reading everything she could about human behavior under stress, the psychology of violence, and the mental factors that separated survivors from victims. She wanted to understand not just how to fight, but why people fought and what gave some individuals the mental strength to overcome seemingly impossible odds. This psychological knowledge proved invaluable in her teaching. Sarah could identify students who had technical skills but lacked confidence, and she knew how to build that confidence through carefully designed training scenarios. She could spot those who were overconfident and potentially dangerous to themselves and others, helping them understand the importance of controlled aggression and tactical thinking. Years of training the military's most elite warriors had given Sarah insights into human nature that few people ever developed. She could read people instantly, understanding their intentions, capabilities, and potential threats they might pose. This wasn't paranoia, it was professional awareness developed through years of training soldiers to survive in the most dangerous environments on Earth. As her 5th year as an instructor approached, Sarah had trained over 300 Navy SEALs and countless other special operations personnel. Her teaching methods had been incorporated into official training curricula, and her innovations in combining medical training with combat instruction had revolutionized how military medics were prepared for combat situations. But perhaps her greatest achievement was the respect she had earned from the warriors she trained. In a community where respect had to be earned through demonstrated competence and courage, Sarah had achieved something remarkable. She wasn't just accepted by the SEALs she worked with, she was genuinely regarded as one of them. This respect wasn't given lightly. The men and women Sarah trained knew that their lives might one day depend on the skills she taught them. They had seen her demonstrate every technique she required them to master, had witnessed her calm competence under pressure, and had learned to trust her judgment completely. The annual SEAL training conference was approaching, bringing together instructors and active duty personnel from around the world. Sarah had been selected to demonstrate advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques to an audience of over 300 elite warriors. It was recognition of her expertise and a chance to share her innovations with the broader special operations community. As she prepared for the conference, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small Ohio town to the pinnacle of military training excellence. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of doubt had led to this point. She had proven that dedication, intelligence, and unwavering commitment could overcome any obstacle. But Sarah also understood that her greatest test might still lie ahead. The skills she had developed and the mindset she had forged weren't just for use in controlled training environments. They were tools for surviving in a dangerous world, and she knew that someday, somewhere, she might need every bit of knowledge and capability she had developed. That someday was approaching faster than she realized. The Special Operations Training Conference was held at the Naval Special Warfare Command Facility in Coronado, California. Sarah arrived 2 days before her scheduled demonstration, wanting to familiarize herself with the venue and equipment she would be using. The facility buzzed with activity as elite warriors from around the globe gathered to share knowledge and techniques that could save lives in combat situations. Walking through the corridors, Sarah encountered faces she recognized from previous deployments and training exercises. There were SEALs she had trained personally, Rangers who had attended her medical courses, and foreign special operations personnel who had participated in joint training exercises. Each greeting reinforced the reputation she had built over the years and the impact her teaching had made on the special operations community. Her demonstration was scheduled for the third day of the conference, in the main auditorium that could accommodate over 400 attendees. Sarah would be presenting her integrated approach to combat medicine, showing how traditional medical training could be enhanced with tactical awareness and defensive techniques. The presentation would culminate with live demonstrations of her hand-to-hand combat methods, performed with volunteer participants from the audience. The night before her presentation, Sarah attended the welcome reception where she mingled with colleagues and old friends. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with the camaraderie that existed among those who had shared dangerous missions and trusted each other with their lives. Stories were shared, techniques discussed, and bonds renewed between warriors who understood each other in ways that civilians never could. During the reception, Sarah noticed three men she didn't recognize standing apart from the main group. They wore civilian clothes but carried themselves with military bearing, and something about their presence made her instinctively uncomfortable. Her years of training had taught her to trust these feelings, and she made a mental note to learn more about who they were and why they were at the conference. Later that evening, Sarah approached Chief Rodriguez, who had been instrumental in her career development and was now serving as the conference coordinator. She mentioned the three men and asked about their background. Rodriguez's expression grew serious as he explained that they were private security contractors who had requested permission to observe the conference. Their company had significant government contracts, and they claimed to be interested in improving their training methods. Something about Rodriguez's tone suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with their presence either, but political realities meant that such requests couldn't easily be denied. He assured Sarah that security was tight and that the contractors would only have access to general sessions, not classified demonstrations. Still, Sarah filed the information away, her instincts continuing to signal that these men represented some kind of potential problem. The next morning brought the start of formal presentations. Sarah spent the day attending sessions on advanced battlefield medicine, new tactical techniques, and psychological training methods. Each presentation reinforced her belief that the special operations community was constantly evolving, always seeking better ways to accomplish their missions while protecting their personnel. Between sessions, Sarah encountered the three contractors again, this time in the corridor outside the medical training classroom. As she passed them, one of the men made a comment to his companions that was clearly intended for her to hear. His words were dismissive and crude, suggesting that women didn't belong in combat training roles and questioning what she could possibly teach real warriors. Sarah's first instinct was to confront them immediately, but her training kicked in. She had learned long ago that the best response to provocation was often no response at all. Stopping to argue with ignorant individuals would only validate their behavior and potentially create a scene that would reflect poorly on the professional nature of the conference. Instead, she continued walking, filing away another piece of information about these men. Their comment revealed not just ignorance and sexism, but also a fundamental misunderstanding of what modern warfare required. The days when military success depended solely on physical strength and aggression were long past. Today's conflicts required intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to work effectively with diverse teams. That evening, Sarah had dinner with several SEALs she had trained over the years. The conversation naturally turned to their experiences using the techniques she had taught them in actual combat situations. Story after story confirmed what Sarah already knew, that her integrated approach to combining medical training with tactical awareness had saved lives and improved mission effectiveness. One of the SEALs, Petty Officer Jake Morrison, described how Sarah's training had helped him during a firefight in Syria. His unit had been pinned down by enemy fire when their medic was wounded. Using techniques Sarah had taught him, Morrison was able to treat the injured medic while simultaneously directing defensive fire and coordinating their extraction. His actions had kept the medic alive until they could reach a field hospital. Another SEAL shared a similar story from Afghanistan, where Sarah's emphasis on situational awareness had helped him identify an ambush before it could be fully executed. The psychological training she provided, focusing on reading environmental cues and trusting intuitive warnings, had allowed him to alert his team and avoid a potentially catastrophic situation. These stories reminded Sarah why her work was so important and reinforced her confidence in the methods she had developed. But they also highlighted the responsibility she carried as an instructor. Every technique she taught, every principle she emphasized, could mean the difference between life and death for the warriors she trained. The conversation eventually turned to the three contractors and their behavior at the conference. Several of the SEALs had noticed their dismissive attitudes and inappropriate comments. There was unanimous agreement that these men didn't understand or respect the professional nature of the special operations community. Chief Rodriguez joined the dinner conversation and revealed additional information that was troubling. The contractors' company had been involved in several controversial incidents overseas, including situations where their personnel had acted outside established rules of engagement. There were questions about their training standards and the psychological screening of their employees. More concerning was information Rodriguez had received from conference security. The contractors had been asking detailed questions about Sarah's background, training methods, and personal life. They seemed particularly interested in her demonstration scheduled for the next day and had specifically requested permission to observe it. Rodriguez assured the group that security would be increased for Sarah's demonstration and that the contractors would be closely monitored. But the information added another layer of concern to what should have been a routine professional presentation. That night, Sarah reviewed her presentation materials one final time, ensuring that every technique was properly prepared and that all safety protocols were in place. She had performed similar demonstrations dozens of times without incident, but something about the current situation made her want to double-check every detail. Her demonstration would showcase advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques specifically designed for situations where weapons weren't available or practical. These methods combine traditional martial arts with military combatives, emphasizing leverage, speed, and the targeting of vulnerable points that could quickly disable an attacker. The techniques weren't just theoretical exercises. Sarah had developed them based on real-world situations that military medical personnel might encounter, from dealing with uncooperative patients suffering from combat stress to defending themselves if captured behind enemy lines. Every move had been tested and refined through countless training sessions. Sarah's approach to teaching these techniques was methodical and safety-focused. She always began with detailed explanations of the underlying principles, ensuring that students understood not just how to perform the moves but why they were effective. She emphasized control and precision over raw force, teaching students to use an attacker's momentum and aggression against them. The morning of her demonstration arrived with perfect California weather. Sarah arrived at the facility early, wanting to inspect the auditorium and ensure that all equipment was properly positioned. The stage had been set up with training mats and the audiovisual equipment she would need to explain her techniques to the large audience. As attendees began filing into the auditorium, Sarah felt the familiar pre-presentation nervousness that she had learned to channel into focused energy. She could see friendly faces in the crowd, SEALs she had trained, instructors she had worked with, and senior officers who had supported her career development. But she also spotted the three contractors, seated together in a section near the back of the auditorium. Their presence continued to feel wrong somehow, though Sarah couldn't articulate exactly why. Her years of training had taught her to trust these intuitive warnings, but, in this controlled environment, surrounded by hundreds of elite warriors, any actual threat seemed unlikely. Rodriguez introduced Sarah to the audience, highlighting her unique background and the innovative training methods she had developed. His words emphasized her combat experience and the proven effectiveness of her techniques in actual military operations. The introduction was met with respectful applause from an audience that understood the difficulty of achieving recognition in such an exclusive community. Sarah took the stage with confidence born from years of similar presentations. She began with an overview of her training philosophy, explaining how traditional approaches to combat medicine needed to evolve to address modern threats. Her voice was clear and authoritative as she outlined the psychological and physical principles that underpinned her methods. The first portion of her demonstration focused on situational awareness and threat assessment. Using volunteers from the audience, Sarah showed how medical personnel could identify potential dangers while treating patients or moving through hostile environments. Her examples were drawn from real-world scenarios that military medics regularly encountered. As the demonstration progressed, Sarah noticed that the three contractors were paying unusually close attention to her techniques. While most of the audience took occasional notes or asked clarifying questions, these men seemed to be studying every detail of her movements and methods. Their intense focus felt different from professional interest, it seemed more personal and, somehow, predatory. Sarah had been trained to continue functioning even when her instincts warned of potential danger. She proceeded with her presentation while maintaining heightened awareness of the contractors and their behavior. Years of experience had taught her to compartmentalize concerns while still remaining alert to changing circumstances. The demonstration moved into its second phase, focusing on defensive techniques for medical personnel. Sarah showed how basic hand-to-hand combat moves could be modified for situations where the defender needed to protect both themselves and a patient they were treating. These techniques required precise timing and positioning, skills that could only be developed through extensive practice. Using a volunteer SEAL as her demonstration partner, Sarah executed a series of defensive moves that showcased her speed, technique, and control. Each movement was explained in detail, with emphasis on the anatomical knowledge that made the techniques effective. Her medical training gave her an understanding of human physiology that enhanced her combat abilities in ways that purely military training couldn't provide. The audience was clearly impressed by the demonstration. These were individuals who understood combat techniques and could appreciate the sophistication of Sarah's methods. Several observers commented quietly to their neighbors about the effectiveness of the moves they were witnessing. But Sarah's attention was increasingly drawn to the three contractors, whose behavior was becoming more noticeably inappropriate. They were making comments to each other and occasionally laughing in ways that seemed dismissive and disrespectful. Their attitude was creating a distraction that was beginning to affect other audience members. During a brief break in the demonstration, Sarah noticed Chief Rodriguez speaking quietly with security personnel. The contractor's behavior had apparently been noticed by others as well, and steps were being taken to address the situation if it escalated further. Sarah decided to modify the remainder of her demonstration slightly, focusing on techniques that would be most valuable for the legitimate audience members while avoiding some of the more specialized methods that probably shouldn't be shared with individuals of questionable character. As the formal presentation concluded, Sarah opened the floor for questions from the audience. The initial questions were professional and insightful, coming from experienced military personnel who understood the complexities of combat medicine and defensive tactics. But then, one of the contractors raised his hand and asked a question that was clearly intended to be provocative. His tone was challenging and dismissive as he questioned whether such techniques would be effective against real threats faced by actual warriors rather than just in controlled training environments. The auditorium fell silent. Sarah recognized this as a deliberate attempt to embarrass her in front of her peers and colleagues. The question revealed both ignorance about her background and disrespect for her demonstrated expertise. Sarah's response was calm and professional, but there was steel in her voice as she detailed her combat experience and the real-world situations where these techniques had been successfully employed. She pointed out that effectiveness in combat wasn't determined by gender or physical size, but by training, mental preparation, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. Her answer was met with approving murmurs from the legitimate audience members, but the contractors seemed unsatisfied with her response. The same individual who had asked the original question made another comment, this time more overtly challenging her competence and suggesting that her techniques might work in controlled demonstrations but would fail against determined opponents. The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah could see that several SEALs in the audience were becoming agitated by the contractor's disrespectful behavior. These warriors had served with her, had seen her in combat situations, and knew firsthand the effectiveness of her training methods. Sarah realized that the situation was rapidly approaching a point where intervention might be necessary. The contractors seemed determined to create a confrontation, and their behavior was becoming increasingly aggressive and disruptive. She made a decision that would have consequences none of them could foresee. Instead of allowing security to remove the disruptive individuals, Sarah chose to address their challenge directly. Looking directly at the lead contractor, she calmly offered to demonstrate the effectiveness of her techniques in a more realistic scenario. If they truly believed her methods were ineffective, they were welcome to test them personally. The auditorium was now completely silent, the tension electric. Every person in attendance understood that what had started as a professional demonstration was about to become something entirely different. The contractors had pushed things too far, and now they were about to discover exactly what they were dealing with. The lead contractor's face showed a moment of uncertainty before his machismo reasserted itself. He stood up, making a comment about being happy to show the audience what happened when real men faced off against playing soldier. As he and his companions began moving toward the stage, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came over her in dangerous situations. Her training was taking over, and she was ready for whatever came next. The 301 elite warriors in the audience were about to witness something none of them would ever forget. The atmosphere in the auditorium shifted dramatically as the three contractors made their way toward the stage. What had been a professional training environment suddenly felt charged with the potential for real violence. Sarah remained calm on the platform, her years of training and combat experience keeping her focused despite the escalating situation. Chief Rodriguez immediately moved to intervene, stepping into the aisle to block the contractor's path. His voice was firm and authoritative as he informed them that their behavior was inappropriate and that they needed to return to their seats immediately. The conference was a professional gathering, not a venue for personal confrontations or challenges to instructors. The lead contractor, a man named Derek Thompson who stood about 6 feet 2 inches with the muscular build of someone who spent considerable time in the gym, stopped and faced Rodriguez. His response was loud enough for much of the audience to hear, and his words dripped with contempt and misplaced confidence. Thompson argued that they had been invited to observe training methods and evaluate their effectiveness. If an instructor was claiming to teach techniques that could save lives in combat situations, wasn't it reasonable to test those techniques under realistic conditions? He suggested that Sarah's offer to demonstrate her methods was exactly what they needed to see. His two companions, equally large men named Marcus Webb and Tony Ricci, positioned themselves on either side of Thompson in what was clearly a coordinated intimidation tactic. All three men had backgrounds in private security work, primarily protecting corporate executives and government officials in relatively safe environments. Their experience with actual combat was limited, but their arrogance was unlimited. Sarah observed the developing situation with the clinical detachment that combat training had instilled in her. She could see that the three men were accustomed to using their size and aggressive attitudes to intimidate others. Their positioning, body language, and verbal tactics all followed predictable patterns that she had studied extensively during her psychological training. More importantly, she could see their weaknesses. Thompson was clearly the leader, but his confidence was based more on bullying than actual fighting ability. Webb appeared nervous, constantly shifting his weight and glancing around the room as if looking for support that wasn't coming. Ricci seemed more genuinely dangerous, with the controlled movements of someone who had actual training, but his positioning suggested he was planning to follow Thompson's lead rather than thinking independently. The audience of SEALs and other special operations personnel watched the confrontation with growing anger and anticipation. These were warriors who had served alongside Sarah, who had seen her perform under fire, and who understood exactly what the contractors were challenging. Many of them were quietly discussing whether they should intervene, but they also recognized that Sarah was more than capable of handling herself. Petty Officer Morrison, who had served with Sarah in Afghanistan, was particularly agitated by the contractor's behavior. He had seen Sarah treat wounded soldiers while under enemy fire, had watched her maintain perfect composure during firefights that left experienced Marines shaking with adrenaline. The idea that these desk-bound security guards thought they could intimidate her was both offensive and absurd. Rodriguez continued trying to defuse the situation through official channels, but the contractors seemed determined to create a confrontation. Thompson kept insisting that they had every right to evaluate the training being presented, especially since their tax dollars helped fund military training programs. His arguments were legally questionable and professionally inappropriate, but they provided him with a justification for his obvious desire to humiliate Sarah. Sarah finally spoke up, her voice carrying clearly throughout the auditorium despite its calm tone. She pointed out that the conference was indeed designed to evaluate training methods, and if the contractors genuinely wanted to test the effectiveness of her techniques, she was prepared to accommodate them. However, she wanted to make sure they understood exactly what they were requesting. Her words were carefully chosen and delivered with the kind of quiet confidence that experienced warriors immediately recognized. She wasn't boasting or threatening, she was simply stating facts about what would happen if the confrontation continued. The contractors, lacking the experience to read these subtle signals correctly, interpreted her calm demeanor as weakness rather than controlled strength. Thompson laughed and made another disparaging comment about military training being designed for people who couldn't make it in the real world of private security. His words revealed both his ignorance about military service and his fundamental misunderstanding of the caliber of individuals he was challenging. The comment proved to be the final straw for several audience members. Multiple SEALs began standing up, clearly preparing to intervene on Sarah's behalf. The situation was rapidly spiraling toward a much larger confrontation that could have serious consequences for everyone involved. Sarah recognized that she needed to take control of the situation before it escalated beyond her ability to manage it. She raised her hand in a gesture that immediately commanded attention from both the contractors and the audience. Her voice remained calm but carried unmistakable authority as she addressed everyone in the auditorium. She explained that the contractors had challenged the effectiveness of her training methods, and, rather than allow the situation to become a general melee, she would accept their challenge personally. If they genuinely wanted to test her techniques against real opposition, she would give them exactly what they were asking for. However, there would be specific conditions that everyone needed to understand and agree to before proceeding. First, the demonstration would be conducted according to strict safety protocols to minimize the risk of serious injury. Second, the contractors would need to sign liability waivers acknowledging that they were participating voluntarily and accepting full responsibility for any consequences. Third, the entire event would be recorded to ensure that there could be no disputes about what actually occurred. Thompson immediately agreed to these conditions, his ego and machismo overriding any consideration of the potential risks involved. His companions seemed less enthusiastic but were clearly unwilling to back down in front of such a large audience of military personnel. Rodriguez looked deeply concerned about the direction events were taking, but he also understood that the contractors had created a situation that needed to be resolved. Their behavior had been so disruptive and disrespectful that simply removing them from the conference would likely not end the matter. Word would spread throughout the private security community that military instructors had been unable to back up their training claims when challenged. While liability paperwork was being prepared, Sarah used the time to mentally prepare for what was about to happen. She knew that the contractors were expecting either a brief demonstration of techniques or possibly a wrestling match where their size and strength would give them significant advantages. What they were actually going to experience was something entirely different. Sarah had no intention of simply demonstrating techniques or engaging in a prolonged physical contest. These men had challenged her competence, disrespected her profession, and created a situation that threatened the reputation of everyone she had trained over the years. Her response would be swift, decisive, and educational for everyone present. Sarah removed her jacket and began stretching, going through the mental preparation routines that had served her well in countless training exercises and real combat situations. She was aware that hundreds of elite warriors were watching her every movement, but she was also aware that this moment would define how she was perceived within the special operations community for years to come. The contractors were also preparing, removing their suit jackets and talking quietly among themselves. Their strategy seemed to be based on the assumption that they could use their size and numbers to overwhelm Sarah before she could effectively employ whatever techniques she had learned. They were planning to prove their point through brute force rather than skill. Thompson was particularly confident, flexing his muscles and making comments about how gym training was more practical than military games. His attitude suggested that he viewed the upcoming confrontation as an opportunity to humiliate not just Sarah but the entire military training establishment she represented. The audience members had taken their seats, but the tension in the room was palpable. Many of the SEALs were clearly struggling with the decision to allow this confrontation to proceed rather than intervening immediately. Their respect for Sarah's capabilities was warring with their protective instincts and their anger at the contractors' behavior. Chief Rodriguez approached Sarah one final time, offering her the opportunity to call off the demonstration and have the contractors removed through official channels. He pointed out that she had nothing to prove to anyone in the audience, all of whom already knew her capabilities and respected her expertise. Sarah appreciated Rodriguez's concern, but she explained that this had gone beyond being about her personally. The contractors were challenging the credibility of military training methods and the competence of female service members. If she backed down now, it would be used as evidence that her techniques were ineffective and that women couldn't handle real confrontations with determined opponents. More importantly, Sarah recognized that this was an opportunity to demonstrate principles she had been teaching for years. In real combat situations, military personnel often faced opponents who were larger, stronger, or more numerous than themselves. The techniques she taught were specifically designed to overcome these disadvantages through superior training, mental preparation, and tactical thinking. As the liability paperwork was completed and the recording equipment was set up, Sarah took her position in the center of the training area. The three contractors positioned themselves about 10 feet away, clearly planning to approach her as a group rather than facing her individually. Their strategy revealed another critical misunderstanding about the situation they had created. They were thinking in terms of a street fight or bar brawl, where numbers and aggression might provide advantages. What they were actually about to experience was a combat situation against someone who had been trained specifically to handle multiple opponents with minimal preparation time. Sarah's mental state shifted into the focused awareness that had served her well in Afghanistan and countless training exercises. She was no longer thinking about the audience, the political implications of the confrontation, or anything beyond the immediate tactical situation she faced. The contractors began moving toward her with confident grins on their faces, apparently believing that the outcome was predetermined in their favor. Thompson was slightly ahead of the other two, clearly intending to be the first to engage while his companions provided support and distraction. What happened next would be discussed and analyzed by special operations personnel for years to come, becoming legendary within the community as an example of what happened when untrained aggression met genuine warrior skills. The confrontation was about to begin, and Sarah was ready. The silence in the auditorium was absolute as the three contractors advanced toward Sarah. Every person present understood they were about to witness something significant, though none of them could have predicted exactly how the next 30 seconds would unfold. Sarah stood perfectly still in the center of the training area, her posture relaxed but alert, like a coiled spring waiting for the precise moment to release its energy. Thompson reached her first, moving with the overconfident swagger of someone who had never faced genuine opposition. His approach was telegraphed from several feet away, a wide, looping punch aimed at Sarah's head, delivered with the kind of haymaker technique that might work in bar fights against unprepared opponents but was laughably ineffective against someone with Sarah's training. Sarah's response was so fast that many observers later claimed they had to review the video recording multiple times to understand exactly what had happened. As Thompson's punch approached, she stepped slightly to her left while simultaneously dropping her center of gravity. The movement was minimal but perfectly timed, causing Thompson's fist to pass harmlessly over her right shoulder while putting her in optimal position for her counterattack. Her response came in three parts, executed so quickly they seemed like a single fluid motion. First, her left hand shot upward in a precise strike to Thompson's exposed throat, targeting the carotid artery and temporarily disrupting blood flow to his brain. Second, her right hand drove into his solar plexus with surgical accuracy, using her knuckles to strike the nerve cluster that would cause immediate paralysis of his diaphragm. Third, her right leg swept behind his advancing left leg while her hands guided his now unbalanced body toward the ground. Thompson collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The combination of the throat strike, the blow to his solar plexus, and the sweep had left him gasping for air on the training mat, completely unable to continue fighting. The entire sequence had taken less than 3 seconds, and Thompson was effectively eliminated from the confrontation before his companions had even reached striking distance. Webb, who had been approaching from Sarah's right side, hesitated for a crucial moment as he processed what had just happened to Thompson. This hesitation gave Sarah the time she needed to reset her position and prepare for the next phase of the encounter. Webb's attack, when it came, was more cautious than Thompson's but equally ineffective against Sarah's superior training. He attempted a grappling approach, reaching out with both hands to grab Sarah's arms and use his size advantage to control her movements. His technique was based on the assumption that if he could get his hands on her, his superior strength would determine the outcome of the fight. Sarah allowed Webb to make initial contact, actually helping him grab her left arm while she controlled the positioning of his hands. This wasn't submission, it was tactical maneuvering designed to put Webb exactly where she wanted him for her counterattack. Using Webb's own grip as an anchor point, Sarah pivoted on her right foot and drove her left elbow into his ribs with devastating force. The blow targeted the floating ribs on his left side, striking with the precise angle and pressure needed to cause maximum damage to the surrounding soft tissue and nerve clusters. Webb's grip loosened immediately as his body tried to process the pain signals flooding his nervous system. Sarah took advantage of this momentary weakness to grab Webb's right wrist with both hands, step under his arm, and execute a perfect shoulder throw that sent him crashing to the ground, with her controlling his descent to minimize the risk of serious injury. As Webb hit the mat, Sarah maintained control of his arm, applying just enough pressure to the joint to ensure he understood that any attempt to continue fighting would result in significant damage to his shoulder. Webb's face showed the confusion of someone who had just discovered that everything he thought he knew about fighting was completely wrong. The entire sequence with Webb had taken approximately 5 seconds, meaning that in less than 10 seconds total, Sarah had effectively neutralized two men who significantly outweighed her and had approached the confrontation with complete confidence in their ability to overpower her. Ricci, the third contractor, had been observing the rapid elimination of his companions while approaching from Sarah's left side. Unlike Thompson and Webb, Ricci had enough training to recognize that he was facing someone with capabilities far beyond anything he had expected. His approach became much more cautious, and his expression showed the beginning of genuine concern about the situation. Ricci's military background was evident in his fighting stance and the way he circled Sarah rather than charging straight at her. He understood basic principles of combat and was trying to look for openings while avoiding the kinds of mistakes that had led to his companions' rapid defeats. However, Ricci's training was conventional military combatives focused on one-on-one confrontations between similarly trained opponents. He had never faced someone with Sarah's combination of advanced martial arts training, combat experience, and the psychological preparation that came from years of teaching these techniques to elite warriors. Sarah could see that Ricci was a more serious opponent than his companions, but she also understood that his conventional training made his responses predictable. He was thinking in terms of establishing distance, looking for openings, and trying to use technique rather than brute force. These were sound tactical principles, but they were based on assumptions about his opponent that were completely incorrect. Ricci attempted a feint with his left hand followed by a straight punch with his right, a combination that showed proper training but lacked the speed and precision that would have been necessary to surprise Sarah. She easily avoided the feint and ducked under the following punch, putting herself in position for a counterattack that Ricci never saw coming. Sarah's response to Ricci was different from her treatment of the first two contractors. She recognized that he had genuine training and deserved a demonstration that matched his higher skill level. Her counterattack was a complex combination that showcased multiple aspects of her advanced training. As she ducked under Ricci's punch, Sarah grabbed his extended arm and used it to pull herself closer while simultaneously driving her knee toward his midsection. When Ricci instinctively moved to block the knee strike, Sarah released his arm and spun away from him, creating distance while positioning herself for the final element of her combination. The spin brought Sarah around behind Ricci's left side, where she delivered a precise strike to the nerve cluster at the base of his neck. The blow was carefully controlled to cause temporary paralysis of his left arm without inflicting permanent damage, but it was executed with the kind of technical perfection that demonstrated years of advanced training. Ricci's left arm went completely numb, and his balance was compromised by the unexpected loss of function on one side of his body. Sarah took advantage of his confusion to step behind him and apply a blood choke that rendered him unconscious within seconds. She carefully lowered his unconscious body to the training mat, ensuring that he wouldn't be injured when he regained consciousness. The entire confrontation with all three contractors had lasted less than 30 seconds. Sarah stood in the center of the training area, surrounded by three men who had approached her with complete confidence in their ability to overpower and humiliate her. Thompson was still gasping for air and trying to regain his composure. Webb was holding his ribs and staring at Sarah with a mixture of pain and disbelief. Ricci was unconscious but breathing normally, his body already beginning to recover from the temporary effects of the blood choke. The auditorium remained completely silent for several moments as the audience processed what they had just witnessed. Many of these elite warriors had seen impressive demonstrations of fighting techniques before, But what Sarah had just accomplished was on an entirely different level. She hadn't just defeated 3 larger opponents, she had done so with a level of technical skill and precision that demonstrated complete mastery of her craft. Each technique had been perfectly executed, with just enough force to achieve the desired result without causing unnecessary injury. Her movements had been economical and efficient, with no wasted energy or unnecessary flourishes. More importantly, Sarah's demeanor throughout the confrontation had remained calm and controlled. She showed no signs of adrenaline, anger, or stress. Her breathing was normal, her posture was relaxed, and her expression was professionally neutral. She had just neutralized 3 determined opponents, and she looked like she could easily handle 3 more if necessary. The first sound to break the silence was Chief Rodriguez clearing his throat as he approached the training area. His expression showed a mixture of relief that the confrontation was over and amazement at the level of skill Sarah had demonstrated. He quickly checked on the 3 contractors to ensure they weren't seriously injured before turning his attention to the broader situation. Thompson was the first to recover enough to speak, though his voice was still strained from the effects of the throat strike. His words were barely audible, but his tone had changed completely from the arrogant confidence he had displayed before the confrontation. He was no longer making challenges or disparaging comments about military training. Instead, he was asking what had just happened to him and how Sarah had made it look so easy. Webb was examining his ribs and trying to understand how a woman significantly smaller than himself had been able to throw him to the ground with such apparent ease. His earlier dismissive comments about military training seemed to have been forgotten as he struggled to reconcile what had just happened with his previous assumptions about fighting and physical capabilities. Ricci regained consciousness within a few minutes, sitting up slowly and looking around the auditorium with obvious confusion. He remembered approaching Sarah and attempting to engage her, but everything after that was a blank until he woke up on the training mat. The realization that he had been rendered unconscious so quickly was clearly disturbing to him. Sarah helped each of the contractors to their feet, checking to ensure they hadn't sustained any serious injuries during the brief confrontation. Her demeanor was professional and courteous, showing no trace of the triumph or satisfaction that might have been expected after such a decisive victory. She treated the 3 men like students who had just learned an important lesson rather than opponents who had been defeated. The audience of SEALs and Special Operations personnel began to react as the immediate shock of what they had witnessed wore off. The initial response was spontaneous applause that quickly grew into a standing ovation. These warriors understood exactly what they had just seen, and they were showing their respect for a demonstration of skill that few people in the world could have duplicated. But the applause wasn't just for Sarah's fighting abilities. It was recognition of the way she had handled an impossible situation with grace, professionalism, and just enough force to resolve the conflict without causing lasting harm to her opponents. She had demonstrated not just technical skill but also the judgment and restraint that separated true warriors from mere fighters. Several of the SEALs who had served with Sarah in combat situations were particularly vocal in their approval. They had seen her perform under fire, and they understood that what the audience had just witnessed was actually a restrained demonstration compared to what she was capable of in a life-or-death situation. Chief Rodriguez addressed the auditorium, officially concluding the demonstration and thanking everyone for their professional conduct during what had become an unusual situation. He emphasized that the confrontation had been initiated by the contractors despite multiple opportunities to resolve the situation through less dramatic means. As the audience began to disperse, many attendees approached Sarah to congratulate her on the demonstration and to ask technical questions about the techniques they had witnessed. The contractors, meanwhile, gathered their belongings and prepared to leave the conference, their earlier arrogance replaced by a much more subdued demeanor. Thompson approached Sarah before leaving, and his words reflected a genuine change in his attitude. He admitted that he had completely misunderstood what military training involved and apologized for his earlier behavior. He acknowledged that he and his companions had learned more about effective fighting techniques in 30 seconds than they had in years of conventional security training. The confrontation that had threatened to embarrass Sarah and undermine confidence in military training methods had instead become a powerful demonstration of why her techniques were so effective and why her reputation within the special operations community was so well deserved. But, more than that, it had shown 301 elite warriors exactly what happened when someone with genuine warrior training faced opponents who relied on size, aggression, and intimidation rather than skill and preparation. The lesson would be remembered and discussed for years to come, becoming part of the legend that surrounded Sarah's remarkable career. The 30 seconds that had just passed would indeed change everything, but not in the way the contractors had intended. The aftermath of the 30-second confrontation reverberated through the special operations community far beyond the walls of the Naval Special Warfare Command facility. Within hours of the conference's conclusion, word of Sarah's demonstration had spread through informal networks that connected elite military units around the world. The story grew with each telling, but, remarkably, the embellishments were minimal because the truth was already so impressive that fiction couldn't improve upon it. The video recording of the incident, which had been made for legal protection, became one of the most requested training materials in special operations circles. Command structures that had initially been concerned about the potential negative publicity from the confrontation quickly realized they possessed documentation of one of the most effective demonstrations of combat training principles ever recorded. Sarah found herself at the center of attention that she had never sought and wasn't entirely comfortable with. Her phone rang constantly with requests for interviews, speaking engagements, and training consultations. Military publications wanted to feature her story, television programs sought her as a guest expert, and foreign military organizations requested her services as an instructor. But the most significant response came from the warriors who had witnessed the demonstration firsthand. The 301 SEALs and special operations personnel who had been present that day became ambassadors for Sarah's methods and philosophy. They shared the story not as entertainment but as a teaching tool, using it to illustrate principles of mental preparation, technical excellence, and professional conduct under pressure. Petty Officer Morrison, who had served with Sarah in Afghanistan, found himself repeatedly asked to describe what he had witnessed. His account always emphasized the same key points. Sarah's techniques had been precise and controlled, her demeanor had remained professional throughout the confrontation, and she had used exactly the amount of force necessary to resolve the situation without causing unnecessary harm. Morrison would often conclude his recounting by pointing out that what they had seen wasn't just a display of fighting ability. It was a demonstration of the warrior mindset that Sarah had been teaching for years, the combination of physical skill, mental preparation, and ethical judgment that separated true professionals from mere fighters. Chief Rodriguez compiled a formal report on the incident for his superiors, documenting both the unprofessional behavior of the contractors and Sarah's exemplary response to their challenge. His report emphasized that Sarah had attempted to avoid the confrontation through official channels, had insisted on proper safety protocols when it became inevitable, and had conducted herself with complete professionalism throughout the incident. The report also noted that Sarah's demonstration had provided valuable insights into the effectiveness of her training methods under realistic conditions. The contractors had approached the confrontation with genuine intent to overpower her, creating conditions that were far more realistic than typical training scenarios. The results had validated years of development work on integrated combat and medical training programs. Rodriguez's recommendation was that Sarah's methods should be more widely adopted throughout the special operations community and that she should be given additional resources to expand her training programs. Her demonstration had proven that the principles she taught weren't just theoretical concepts but practical tools that could be immediately effective in real-world situations. The contractors themselves disappeared from the special operations training circuit entirely after the incident. Their company's contracts with government agencies were quietly terminated, and rumors circulated that their security clearances had been revoked. Thompson, Webb, and Ricci found themselves facing questions about their professional competence and judgment that effectively ended their careers in the security industry. Thompson, who had initiated the confrontation, struggled most with the aftermath. His entire self-image had been based on his physical capabilities and aggressive attitude, and Sarah's effortless neutralization of his attacks had shattered his confidence completely. He eventually left the security field entirely, reportedly taking a job in sales where physical confrontation wasn't part of his daily responsibilities. Webb and Ricci handled the experience differently, using it as motivation to seek genuine training rather than relying on size and intimidation. Both men enrolled in martial arts programs and began studying the kinds of techniques Sarah had demonstrated. They came to understand that their previous approach to physical conflict had been based on ignorance and false assumptions about what actually determined effectiveness in combat situations. For Sarah, the immediate aftermath of the demonstration was both gratifying and overwhelming. She was pleased that her methods had been validated so dramatically, but she was also concerned about the level of attention the incident had generated. Her goal had always been to train others effectively, not to become a celebrity within the military community. More importantly, Sarah understood that the confrontation had implications beyond just her personal reputation. The way she had handled the situation would influence how female military personnel were perceived throughout the special operations community. Her professional conduct and technical excellence had reinforced the principle that effectiveness in combat was determined by training and preparation rather than gender or physical size. The weeks following the conference brought a parade of official recognition and informal acknowledgement of Sarah's achievements. Her commanding officer recommended her for a commendation based on her professional conduct during the incident and the positive publicity her demonstration had generated for military training programs. But the recognition that meant the most to Sarah came from the students she had trained over the years. Messages poured in from SEALs, Rangers, and other special operations personnel who had learned from her, sharing stories of how her training had helped them in actual combat situations and expressing their pride in being associated with her methods. One message came from a Navy corpsman who had used Sarah's techniques during a medical evacuation in Iraq. His unit had come under attack while he was treating wounded soldiers, and the defensive methods Sarah had taught him had allowed him to protect both himself and his patients until reinforcements arrived. His message emphasized that Sarah's training had quite literally saved lives in a real-world situation. Another message came from a female Marine who had attended one of Sarah's courses on situational awareness and defensive tactics. The Marine described how Sarah's teaching about reading body language and trusting intuitive warnings had helped her identify and avoid a potential assault while off duty. The training had given her both the skills and confidence needed to protect herself in a dangerous situation. These messages reminded Sarah why her work was so important and reinforced her commitment to continued excellence in training methods. Each person she trained properly could potentially save multiple lives, either through medical skills or defensive capabilities. The ripple effects of effective training extended far beyond individual students to the units they served with and the missions they supported. The incident also prompted Sarah to refine her approach to training and instruction. She had learned valuable lessons about how to handle disruptive behavior and professional challenges, and she incorporated these insights into her teaching methods. Future training sessions would include more emphasis on professional conduct and the importance of maintaining discipline even when facing provocation. Sarah also began developing new curriculum focused on the psychological aspects of conflict and confrontation. Her experience with the contractors had reinforced her understanding that many dangerous situations resulted from poor judgment and inadequate training rather than genuine malicious intent. By teaching people to recognize and avoid these situations, she could potentially prevent conflicts before they escalated to violence. 6 months after the conference, Sarah was invited to speak at the Pentagon about the future of military training programs. Her presentation focused on the importance of integrated training that combined physical skills with psychological preparation and ethical judgment. She argued that the most effective warriors weren't those who could inflict the most damage, but those who could achieve their objectives with the minimum necessary force. Her Pentagon presentation was attended by senior officers from all branches of the military, including several generals and admirals who were responsible for training policy across the entire Department of Defense. The discussion that followed her presentation led to new initiatives in military education and the adoption of her integrated training approach at multiple military institutions. The success of these programs validated Sarah's belief that effective training had to address the complete person rather than just physical capabilities. Students who learned to integrate medical knowledge, combat skills, psychological awareness, and ethical judgment were more effective in all aspects of their military service. 2 years after the conference incident, Sarah was promoted to the rank of Senior Chief Petty Officer and given command of her own training facility. The new position allowed her to implement her educational philosophy on a larger scale and to train instructors who could spread her methods throughout the military. The facility became known for producing graduates who were not only technically proficient but also demonstrated exceptional judgment under pressure. Military units specifically requested personnel who had been trained at Sarah's facility, knowing that they would receive individuals who could be trusted to perform effectively in the most demanding situations. Sarah's story became part of the curriculum at multiple military academies and training centers. The incident at the conference was used to illustrate principles of professional conduct, conflict resolution, and the importance of proper training. Students learned not just about the techniques Sarah had used, but about the mindset and preparation that had made those techniques effective. The legend that grew around Sarah's 30-second demonstration served multiple purposes within the military community. It provided inspiration for other female service members who faced questions about their capabilities. It reminded all personnel about the importance of continuous training and professional development. Most importantly, it illustrated that true warrior spirit was measured not by aggression or the ability to cause harm, but by the skill to protect others and resolve conflicts with minimum necessary force. As Sarah's career continued to evolve, she never forgot the lessons learned during those crucial 30 seconds. The confrontation had tested everything she had learned about combat, leadership, and professional conduct, and she had met the challenge with the kind of performance that defined her entire approach to military service. The 301 elite warriors who witnessed the demonstration carried the memory with them throughout their careers. They shared the story not as a tale of individual achievement, but as an example of what became possible when dedication, training, and character combined under pressure. Sarah had shown them what it meant to be a true professional warrior, and that lesson influenced how they approached their own service and training. Years later, as Sarah reflected on the incident that had made her legendary within the special operations community, she remained focused on the same principles that had guided her throughout her career. Excellence in training wasn't about personal recognition or dramatic demonstrations. It was about preparing others to succeed in the most challenging situations they would ever face. The contractors who had challenged her that day had inadvertently created an opportunity for Sarah to demonstrate the effectiveness of everything she had worked to develop over her career. Their attempt to diminish her credibility had instead provided the most powerful validation possible of her methods and philosophy. In those 30 seconds, Sarah had proven that true strength came not from size or aggression, but from preparation, skill, and the courage to act decisively when action was required. She had shown 301 of the world's most elite warriors what it looked like when someone truly mastered their craft and remained true to their principles under pressure. The legend born that day would continue to inspire and instruct future generations of military personnel, serving as a reminder that excellence was always possible for those willing to pursue it with complete dedication. Sarah's story became proof that with proper training and unwavering commitment, any individual could develop the skills needed to protect themselves and others, regardless of the challenges they might face. The woman who had started as a small-town girl with dreams of becoming a veterinarian had instead become something far more significant, a warrior whose influence would be felt throughout the military community for decades to come. Her 30-second demonstration had changed everything, but it was really just the culmination of years of dedication to excellence and service to others. Sarah Mitchell had proven that when someone tries to overpower a true warrior, they might find themselves taken down in seconds, watched by those who understand exactly what they're witnessing, the difference between someone who talks about strength and someone who has spent their life developing it.